Merry Christmas, Rick.
Merry Christmas, George.
I guess Merry December 27th.
That's right. That's correct. In between. So we're off and running, I guess.
You know, all I can think about is how fast June 6th or June, the start of RAAM is going to be here.
Yeah, the whole season is starting. All the races pretty much have dates in hand. People are starting to prepare, looking at RAAM, RAW, or whatever the event of their choice might be.
Texas coming up in March. I
Yeah.
mean, that's so close.
Yeah, lots of big events just around the corner, and everybody has to prepare for them differently because while some people may be looking at RAAM and RAW as their big A race of the year, their big A race of the year might be RAO or Hoodoo or one of the other events out there. So you're in December now. Could have even started doing this a couple months ago, but kind of looking ahead and how to lay out a calendar and what you need to do to plan to get ready rolling in because the new year flips in 5-6 days.
Exactly. And I mean, first off, you want to pick the races you want to do. We're talking about planning your calendar and what goes into that.
Yeah, I mean, you have lots of options, of course, right? So you probably want to choose the type of race you want to do, and is it a training race? Is it your A race of the year? Is it your big race? Do you want to choose something like a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race, or a road race that's more like an RAO or RAW, or where you have a support vehicle following you? And a lot of that has to do with what your end goals are, or just what you want to do. Some people don't want to go race a 500-mile race, but they want to dive into a 12 or 24.
I always liked it. I mean, back in the 90s, going out, and it was a really fun way to see different parts of the country.
World now,
yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
So I agree. I've always looked at any of my racing, whether it was adventure racing, running, cycling, even mountain climbing, it was all about where. I wanted to go somewhere fun. I wanted to go somewhere appealing, good courses. So the great thing about now is we have races, qualifying events all over the world. And again, even if you're not looking to qualify for RAAM, these events are amazing. I mean, you can take your pick all over Europe, India now, Australia. They're just great events. The United States.
I remember doing the Hope Race. It lasted 2 years, and it was the way I got to see the Northeast. Went out. It was from Boston to DC, and it was so exciting to go out and see a different part of the country that I'd never been in. That's how I saw Alaska the first time. Went out and did a bike race from Anchorage to Fairbanks.
So interestingly enough, looks like fireweed may be coming back. It's been gone for a couple of years, and I've never been to Alaska. It's one of the 4 states I haven't been to. So that might be something I look at and go, well, I can go race. I can tick off a travel spot I've never been to and always wanted to go. I like that events give you that now. Like if I had the time and money now, I would seriously look at doing some of these races in India and Austria and wherever, Switzerland, Italy. They're just beautiful. I've been out to Dolomitica,
India,
and I mean stunning places to go see and ride your bike. And like some of these events are just amazing. And even in the United States now, you have events all over the country. You have Oregon, California, Nevada, Texas. Of course, coming across the country, you got a bunch. You have events in Maryland, a new event in Florida. So it's really a good way to
Tennessee and
Mississippi. Yeah, sorry, I skipped Natchez. But they are cool reasons to go see places that you may never go see otherwise. Or alternatively, like if you are planning on racing an event like RAAM or RAW and you live in New York and don't have a desert to go ride in, maybe going and racing somewhere out in the southwest area where you might get some of that desert environment and you can kind of train your body, see what it's like, or go preview routes.
And I mean, again, choosing a race, choosing your calendar. This isn't like, hey, I'm going to run a 5K next weekend.
No, these are
They
fairly,
really take some planning.
they take time, they take resources, they take money. So you may be looking ahead as RAO is your race of the year. Well, how do I get to RAO? How do I get to that 500 miles? So you're going to say you need to kind of look at your calendar, what time of year your event is going to be, your big event, and work backwards. Look at, so we have RAO at the end of July, and I'm not at 500-mile ready, so where do I go? Go do a 200-mile in Texas early on, or go do Hell Week and get base miles in. Then you have, you can get something, maybe Bessie's Creek or something a little bit later as you lead up to it. So think about your resources and what you have, because if you're living like in Minnesota where it's 12 degrees today, and you're getting ready for a 500-mile event in Texas in March, you might want to try to get out of there for a minute or two.
I'm doing 2-a-days on the Wahoo right now.
Yeah. So all things to consider, like now, as you're looking ahead. And, this applies not just to solo racers. If you're a team, you don't want to show up at a lot of these events having no practice under your belt, especially events like RAAM and RAW. Or let's say you get to any of the big European or Indian events like Austria or Race Across India now. They're long, big events. And if you're racing as a relay team, I think one of the worst things to do is show up and not have any practice together.
Or strategy.
Or strategy, or any of those things. So again, like it's a really good opportunity that maybe you're racing RAAM in June and you look at, hey, there is Texas in March, or maybe an earlier race in Europe that you can go get 3-4 of your people together and some of your crew and go practice a little bit somewhere where it's warm and you can get those miles in your legs and learn a little bit about your teammates and crew.
And if you can't, make a training weekend.
Yeah.
Where you're out practicing. I've done that every year before RAW.
Yeah, and you've done it virtually too as well.
We did it virtually, which was a blast. And it was amazing how Sylvia and I both really got into it when our teammate was over 1,000 miles away. We were just back and forth on the phone. Hey, I'm coming in. Or my crew chief would say, George is getting ready to wrap his ride. And Sylvia would get out of the van, get ready to go. I mean, we ran it like we were making exchanges.
Right, and it's critical to start these things now and plan now, because people are busy. They have jobs, kids, lives, they have other things they're doing. So you don't want to be rolling around going, oh, well, we'll address that in March for our event in June, and then realize everybody is busy in May and April, and you can't get any of your teammates together, any of your crew together to spend a weekend of time away from families.
Yeah, we're planning a May 1,000-mile training ride race simulation.
Yeah, and now's the time to do it.
Yep.
Because again, like shit happens and you got to adjust for these things. Let's say something pops up for your teammate, you got to move it a week earlier. Well, now you have time to shuffle things around or plan your other things around that weekend. So really, I think planning for the following year, so in this case, planning for 2023, really the key window for that is probably October to December, and start laying out, planning of events. There's other things that go into planning too, not just which event you race, because once you get the event, there's a lot of little building blocks that go around that are, again, not easy. People often say getting to the start line of RAAM is one of the hardest things to do. And it's in part true, because you have multiple other things to worry about other than just getting there and jumping on your bike and going. There's a lot of parts to it.
But you want to be set where you can just jump on your bike and go when you get there.
Absolutely. You don't want to have to worry about extra things. There's already enough. Or any of these.
When you're doing vehicle inspections at RAW and RAAM, is the majority prepared, or are there quite a few people who show up really not ready?
So it's interesting. So we've actually kind of shifted how we do inspections now. We let people self-inspect, but our officials watch really closely the first 48 hours. And they really do look at vehicles, bicycles, etc. What I have noticed over the years since my dad raced in '05 and '06, and we took over the race in '07, in those earlier years, people were much less prepared. But there was no way for them to really know. So a lot of times they would kind of show up blind. They didn't have a lot of guidance in what to look for. So it like '07, '08, walking around the parking lot and actually physically doing inspections was a little bit like a three-ring circus. Some people would be really prepared and other people not so much. And now people are more and more prepared. There are still some that show up less prepared than they should. But now we have options like attending seminars, which we have posted online. We usually do them in January and February. That walks you through a whole bunch of stuff and how to be prepared. You also have more videos available. You have online forums. You have people you can discuss with. You have a lot more options. So I think as a whole, people are showing up more and more prepared as a whole. And especially the people who take the time to read the emails, read the materials, read the rules. And that's not true. That's not just true for RAAM. It's true for any event. Like it doesn't really matter. They're all kind of the same setups for the most part. And so the resources are better for them, and we hope to make them even better so that they are showing up more prepared.
And part of showing up prepared is having some money, being ready to go and have your team funded. Putting your budget together is a really big part of your planning.
Huge.
And I've had years where I was heavily sponsored, had other years where I was on a shoestring, and I really liked the shoestring.
You know, and it's funny that you say that because you're not the only racer who has said that to us. Because people always ask, well, what does it cost? And I'm like, well, what is your budget? Because I personally think people spend way more than they have to on lots of things they don't need. Now, it's one thing to come prepared versus not prepared and spending money and not spending money. But I do know Jason Lane, who is a very talented road racer, has raced RAAM twice, and he said one year he had a very big budget, motorhome, everything to go with it, and they just spent money. And then he came back and had almost no budget. He did it on, I think, $12,000 or something, so a really small budget. And he had 2 cars, a pickup truck and a sedan, and 5 crew, had a better race, and he said it was way better because I didn't have some of the luxuries to just write checks to answer questions.
That's exactly how I feel.
And you get better at getting down to what you truly need. And he's like, you know, and I know Dex kind of followed this rule, like the motorhome is for the crew. I slept in a ditch. Well, the second year Jason raced, and motorhome wasn't even an option, so he literally just slept in a ditch or the bed of a pickup truck. And he said it was much easier to get out of bed and keep racing. And of course, teams and solo racers, they all vary in how you approach things. But that budget is really critical to lay out because you don't want to get on the road and come up short. But it also, you should use it as an opportunity to think about what you really need to spend money on. And some people don't care. They have the money, they have the budget, so it's not that important to them whether they're going to spend a lot of money to run a motorhome that they may or may not need. You really don't need one to race and be quite successful. But if you have money, I understand why you might want one.
And you know, when you're planning your budget and maybe asking a company for some money, or you know, you're going for sponsorships, think about how you're going to show those sponsors. What's the value they're going to get? Is really having their name on a jersey going to get them that much out of what you're doing? Or are events that you're going to put on, you know, where you're talking to the local community or whatever? But you've really got to plan that, because if you say, oh, you give me $500, you're going to get your logo on my jersey, that means you've got to get kits printed up. And that's expensive.
Right. And so again, going back, looking at those things, looking at where that money is going to be spent, how much you need, it also allows you to go talk to a sponsor, because you can't walk into a sponsor and just say, well, I need stuff, whether it's money or nutrition or whatever, a bike. They know what you need. They know that. What they want to know is what they're getting back. So you better have an idea of walking in and saying, okay, well, I need whatever. I need 20 bottles of Endurolights from Hammer Nutrition, and I need some whatever else from them. You better know exactly what you need. Not, well, I might need some of this, whatever you can spare, because they can't spare anything. They're doing it as a sponsorship. They want something in return. Whether, again, cash is one of those things. So if you walk in and say, hey, I got to have kits printed up. My kits are going to be $1,500 to have these many printed up. I can do these things for you. They're really critical things to present to them, because all these companies know what you're going to ask for. What they want to know is what you're getting back too. And so it's one thing if it's your good buddy and they're just like, great, yeah, whatever, I'll write you a check for $500, $1,000, and sure, put my company name on your jersey. But most companies are not going to be that way. They're going to say, okay, you want this? What am I getting back? And if you can do something cool, I know Leah Goldstein does it. I know Christoph Strasser. They do speaking and film tours. I know teams like the Opportunists do some really cool stuff in their community. Like they raise money for, I believe it's a school. And so they set up a mini RAAM course in the parking lot, and the kids get to ride it. So there's really cool things you can do. But in order to do these things, you need to know what kind of money and time. And again, budget's not just money, it is time too.
Right.
Because you're going to spend time doing a lot of these things. And if your budget is really dependent on sponsorship, you need to start early, and you need to accept the fact you're going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes.
And let's kind of get into the timeline of you've got to raise the money, you've got to select your crew, and you've got to be in shape.
Yes, you do. You need to do a lot of things. You have you're starting training now, or started a while ago, to race RAAM next year. So again, depending on your event that you're doing, you should probably have a coach by now, and you should probably be structuring some type of training plan. Again, solo, team, very different. What's the plan? Where do you go? Like, what are you doing now? Are you laying out 1,000-mile weekends? Probably not.
Nope. And I probably never will. No, actually I will in May, but as a total race simulation. But yeah, everything I'm doing now is leading up to that. And we're doing, last year I was out with pretty major surgery. So
Yep.
I was very little time on my bike at all, but I was doing mind games with myself. I went out after work one day and walked for 24 hours.
Yes, you did.
And that was all just to keep my head in the game.
Yeah, and so
Because there's no reason to be doing this other than, and that is what made me feel good about that weekend, was that was really self-driven.
So training is also your part of the preparation and timeline you're looking at for training is not just physical, and not just riding a bike. There may be weights involved. There mental training. Now's the time to mess around with your nutrition, because you don't want to do it in May for RAAM. You want to be doing it now and seeing what works and doesn't work. Your equipment. Make sure your bikes fit right. Make sure your saddles are good. Your shoes feel okay. Don't wait to do these things. You should be doing all these things now, really, in kind of your planning and preparation process.
And then that also leads into selecting your crew.
Yes.
And we talk about this a lot, but I don't think you can talk about it too much.
No, and we'll get into a kind of a separate video about more crew and crew chief specifics, or also choosing racers if you're on a team. But all those things should be happening now. They should be happening October, November, December, because what you're going to do is you're going to pick 8 crew members and go, great, I'm set. And then in May, you're going to lose 2 of them because their job won't allow them time off, or they have a family emergency. You don't want to be stuck in a bind. And those are very critical things to think about, and it's always good, I think, if you have a handful of core members you can count on. Let's say you need 10 crew, probably have 12 ready. And now's that time. Now's the time to plan and start picking those people's brains. I mean, we do it even with our staff. We start pretty much January 1 assembling staff for RAM and RAW, because we know throughout the assembling of that staff, might be too early for some to commit, but others want to know. And then come May, we know some people can't make it. We got to fill the blanks. Who can we keep on the sidelines ready to go at a moment's notice?
I think crew is, I know I get asked that a lot. How many crew do I need for RAO or 444? Or, I mean, that's got to be a huge question of RAM.
We get it all the time. We get it for all our events. We even get it for the WTTC, even a time trial event. Do I need crew, or how many should I have out there? And RAM, of course, is logistically bigger and more complex, and so is RAW. But the application holds true for any of the events. Like, think about their jobs, what you need them to do, and what it takes to get across the country or around Oregon or wherever. You need to think about where you're going to get them from, how many you need. RAM can vary a lot. I think a lot of people have too many crew, believe it or not.
I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I think you don't want to be running on bare bones, but you don't want to have so many people it's like herding goldfish. Like, you have to have a crew chief that kind of can contain all these things and keep everyone moving and directed. And now's the time to start getting those people in place. And it also allows you, if you're planning ahead a little bit, to say, oh, hey, all right, yeah, even if you're an 8-person team, let's say you can get 4 of your people down to Texas out to race. Go do it, because it will give you an idea of what you need for crew. It also give you an idea about what your racers are like. Selecting racers is very challenging. Quite often we'll get individuals say, hey, I'm looking for a team, or teams, hey, I'm looking for a racer. You want to make sure you can all work together, because it's tough sitting in a car or being on the road for a handful of days and not like the people you're with.
Yeah, I got to say, one of the great preps that I actually took part in when I was racing RAW 2-person, an 8-person team did a 200-mile race against each other. So they had 4. One had 3 because someone couldn't show up, and so I was able to pop in, and that was great. Again, just another race simulation before 2-person RAW, but they raced each other, and they were almost dead even the entire way. But it was such a cool, competitive, real experience, and it had the crew out there, it had the racers out there, and it just was a really good weekend.
Right, and I think what it does is it'll answer a lot of questions, and it'll create a lot of questions. And they're both really good things to have, not to mention you get some experience. You get to go out and feel what it's like to be buzzing around another team. And, and those are the types of things that you want to do sooner than later. And especially if you're in a location where you can do them. Like, if you live in California, you pretty much have beautiful weather year round, certainly in Southern California. So take the time, go out and practice a little bit. And again, selecting those racers and crew, you may think that, just because he's your best buddy from high school and you've been really good friends for 30 years, he's going to be a great crew member because you like drinking beer on Friday with him. It may not be true. It really might not
Might
be
be
true.
great for drinking beer on Friday, and that's it.
Then that's it. And those are things you want to learn and think about, plan for now, plan for contingencies where, again, you have a 4-person team. I'd have a racer or 2 in your back pocket that can jump in. We've had racers swapped out at the start line of RAM. We had one racer go down, and one of their crew members happened to be a veteran RAM racer who was fit and ready to race. And he said, can I race since this person's injured? I said, absolutely, we want you out there. So again, really good things to think about well in advance.
And then let's just brush on strategy a little bit. Solo, 2-person, 4-person, 8-person, everybody's got a strategy. that really leads back to your objectives. Are you there to win? Are you there to set a record? Are you, what is your goal? Do you want an official finish?
Yeah, and again, it doesn't seem like much to think about now, but it will all, like, your strategy and objectives will really play into a lot of your budget, how you select racers and crew, how you go about things. If your main objective is, hey, we want to go out as a group of friends, have the best race we can have, raise a bunch of money for our charity, that's much different than throwing together a team of super fast racers that they want to win. And what you do around those two things are very, very different. And the other thing that I always think is a good idea is to not have one objective. Because if you have one objective in so many of these races, that can fall apart quickly. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a 12-hour, 24-hour, 500 miles, 3,000, doesn't matter, because you want to have things where, I've seen really talented racers, guys like Andrew Willis, go out and he's used to winning, but he has a bad race, blows up, and you're like, oh, what do I do? Or George Thomas, who ends up having to go to the hospital for a little bit in the middle of his race, and he thinks, yeah, we're going to win this, and then you're like, oh crap, maybe we're not. So what are the secondary objectives, and third and fourth? And they can be things like winning age groups, winning overall, raising money for charity, just finishing and having a good time with your friends. Like, they're all good objectives to have, but those ultimately affect your strategy. As a solo racer, are you going to go out and push and push and push because you want to win, or maybe ride a little bit more conservative because all I want to do is get to the finish line, and I'm going to budget my time accordingly?
But you got to watch when you're budgeting on that, because if you're running out of budget, you're in big trouble.
Again, budgets are a lot of different things.
Terry and I, when we did tandem in 2002, I felt like that was one of our best strategies, but we didn't explain it to the crew, who had no idea what our sheets and all these times were. But we had, what would it take to set a record? What would it take to finish in a time that we really wanted? And then where do we have to be? And we put together times for each time station. So when we would hear that, it was like, oh my gosh, we were behind, we got to pick it up, whatever it was. But it was really nice to have the three goals out there of, this is what you can do if everything's going really, really well. This is what you have to do to make it to the finish.
Yep. And you brought up a really interesting point too. And again, the communication part of it's really key. It's great that you and Terry knew what you wanted to do, but if your crew doesn't know that, then they're out there for a Sunday drive. It can greatly affect what you have. And we've seen that. We speak from a fair bit of experience racing and putting on races for the past 20-something years. So we are talking about this not from a point of ignorance, but from a pretty good sample size of being part of these things. And if your crew is not on the same page as you, you can be in trouble. You could be the fastest racer in the world, and we've seen it. We've seen really, really talented racers with really, really crappy crews, and it costs them finishes, it costs them wins, a lot of things. And again, holds true for teams. If you're going out there and you have all the most talented athletes in the world, you take a team like Beamer. Like, those guys are so fast, or Action Sports, from a few years ago, in four-person division. They are such good, talented athletes. They're not the ones that are going to probably screw up the objective at the end. Your crew's got to be on that same page. And if they aren't, if everyone's not there with you, not only could your record be gone, but your finish could be gone.
Sue Notarangelo said something to me that has always stuck. In 2002, we had some crew difficulties.
Yep.
And I was saying something about that because Terry and I were really trained up. We wanted to get the tandem record that year, and not even close. But I was saying something about the crew, and Sue just cut me off, and she said, "George, who picked that crew?" I said, "I did." She goes, well, then who's the responsibility on it? I said, it's on me, and I have always taken that, and she's 100% right.
It is. It makes all the difference in the world. And the interesting thing too, you know, people talk, you know, again, we'll get into more specifics on racers and crew and how to choose them and what traits to look for. But just because someone's a veteran crew member doesn't make them a good crew member. And quite often they may not be a good crew member. And so you don't need to have a boatload of experience to be a rock solid crew person. And we found that to be very true in my dad's race. We had a bunch of rookies for the most part and did really well. So again, just things to think about. You know, now's the time, October to December, plan ahead. Don't wait till last minute to do things. You know, even when it comes down to, you know, when we go back to choosing a race, don't wait to the last minute to register for races, you know, and read the materials they give you, because all that does is kind of kick the can down the road, and it will delay a lot of your other planning aspects of things. And I feel like once I'm committed to an event, you know, to participate in it, I feel more urgency to get ready. Whereas if I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go do that, but I'll just register like later. I don't use, so what if I save 50, $100? It doesn't matter that much. I'd just rather not register. When I do that, I find that I get a little more anxious, and it's my own doing. When I could have just said, "Hey, I'm going to register for this race. I'm committed. Now I can get ready to do it, and I don't have to think about doing that later."
So what happens if someone is going through the RAAM website, sees this video, and it's February, and they're thinking, gosh, I really want to do the race this year?
You know, I'm not saying you can't, but just consider the planning involved. You know, I think fortunately for an event like RAAM, even RAW, most people are already starting to think about it long before that. Now, whether they've gone through the specifics that we've kind of talked to about planning, it's at least been in their head. But if you're doing that to yourself in February, thinking you're going to race RAW or RAAM, if you've never raced long distances like that before, I would say you're better off waiting a year. I just, as an event director, I want you to have a great experience. And even if you have to DNF during a race, doesn't mean you can't have a good experience during the race and up to it.
Or learning experience.
Or learning experience. And so I don't want to see people force themselves in just because they thought it was a great idea at the last minute. I think when you, as the events get shorter and shorter, different can be different, but still, none of these events are easy, not one of them. And so you really should plan far enough in advance that you're not scrambling at the end, because scrambling leads to more mistakes.
Any words to people that are planning on racing in 2023?
Now's the time. You know, now's the time to start putting all these things we just talked about into motion if you haven't already. And you're not behind at this point, but don't get behind. Don't wait till March, because by March, a lot of these things are either gone and you've lost the opportunity, or you start to do what I just said and you start to scramble. And when you start to scramble for big events, especially RAAM, RAW, those types of events, you're putting yourself at such a deficit, putting yourself so far behind that it's going to take some of the enjoyment out of the actual race, and it's already hard enough to plan for and be ready for. And don't make it worse than it has to be, you know. But you still got a long year ahead. Now's the time, you know, to start really laying these things out, thinking about them, no matter what event you're doing. Even if your event is something like Natchez or the 508, which is farther later in the year, you know, consider these things, because there may be events earlier in the year that you want to use as kind of your launching pad. So planning, it's as critical as actually being on the bike and riding. Like, you need to be ready to go out there and do it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. We'll have another installment soon.